Hey guys, Alvin here. Just a heads up and a bit of an apology on my part. In my excitement for today's podcast, I forgot to plug my mic in. So Tori and I recorded almost 2 hours worth of uh, post Wimbledon wrap up in person this time with my mic unplugged. So you'll hear some less than stellar quality from my end. Apologies for that, but the content's still pretty good, and I hope you guys enjoy it. All right. And welcome to another edition of the Best Three podcast. I'm still Alvin, not in Studio B, I'm in Studio A, and that's still Tori. Tori, how you
Yes,
doing, man?
sir. I'm doing good, Alvin. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. It's a little interesting that usually we do this from about 30 miles away from each other, but right now I can see
we're,
you right
we're
there
we're less than 30 feet.
across the hall. Yeah, right
Yeah.
across the hall. So we just finished up watching we just finished up watching Sinner versus Alcaraz,
I'm
Wimbledon
still not
final.
ready. I'm still not ready. I'm trying to get ready. Give me a long range throw. Let me get my thoughts together.
Yeah,
Cause
sure. I mean, it's Sinner 3 sets to 1 against Alcaraz. I don't remember the exact score, something like 4-6, 6-4,
6'4",
six
six
four, six
four.
four. Yeah.
Uh,
And it was interesting. We watched this match together in person,
yep. Yep.
which was cool. That's always fun to do.
And had its moments.
It had its moments. We had a nice little contentious crowd of other followers who came
That's
and joined
true.
us to
That's
watch
true.
the match. So
Shout out to T-Rav
T-Rav
for
four,
always bringing a very unique perspective on the tennis matches.
absolutely, and Joel Gurley always throwing in
Yes, sir.
the speaking for the casual tennis fan, right? Speaking
Yes.
on behalf of the
Yes.
casual tennis fan, which is it's good for us to hear those perspectives and
It
always
is.
make sure that we talk about tennis at a certain what I'd like to consider a high level, but it not to the point of excluding people,
Right.
but to the point of including people, right?
Right.
Like helping people become better tennis fans. My own personal mission in life is to
Yeah.
bring people to the sport that didn't necessarily come up in the sport. So
Yeah.
um, always found it very similar to our
Yeah. And I think my overall tennis, if you will, uh, mantra is to help connect the game. It's bigger than the game, right?
yeah.
It always connects us at a certain level in life. It's a microcosm, right? And shout out to Joel and Travis for helping us to see that from time to time. Alvin, what did you think today? If you had to sum it up with a headline, what would your headline be tomorrow in the AJC, for an example?
Oh, a perfect example. Too good.
Mm,
Sinner's just he's too good, and when you take all of the things that we've talked about, not only over this fortnight, but over the last 5 or 6 weeks or so. Um, this being what I like to call a shooter's paradise, right?
yep.
His weapon of choice is just raw pace.
Mm,
He forces his opponents to be damn near perfect when trying to find ways to hurt him. And I think this is outside the headline. We're now in the body of the piece at this point. But
right.
outside of that, like Carlos had to do a lot to find places to extract errors and to win points from Jannik. I guess point one is he didn't find a lot of errors.
Yeah.
Um, and point two, once Jannik got his grips in, that was tough sledding, man.
Oof.
That's he was bringing a lot of leverage, a lot of pop,
Yep.
not a lot of room for error.
0.
And Carlos, the magic trick that Carlos had to pull to come from down a break in the first set at 2-4 to come back, fantastic point, like that took everything out of him to win
Right.
that on set point.
Right.
Like Yannick looked at that and goes, "You can't do that for another 3 hours."
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I don't think any of us felt like
Right.
he could either
Yep.
without being perfect.
Right. And you're not going to be perfect, right? So there it is. Alvin, I'm going to counter slash add. This will be a weird roundabout story. My father worked for Boeing for many, many years. And I remember in the mid 80s, early 90s, he was a low level executive to mid level executive with Boeing. And they took all the executives over to Japan for this big, this whole movement that Japan was going into, and it was called TQC. I remember it like it was yesterday because my father came home ranting and raving about it. Total quality control, right? And TQC, especially in the parts department and in the service department and the manufacturing, was all about reducing the margin down to micrometers of what it would take to make something dependable, duplicatable, and just to last. Toyota, of course, was one of the preeminent companies at that time, right?
Lean production,
right. But TQC, and literally, right? TQC was, they had it down in the 80s and 90s as a way to make the margin so small that your part, whatever it was going to fit, last, and produce a workable machine for years to come. So I'm asking my dad, I'm 10 years old, give or take at the time. Well, Dad, what do you mean TQC? Micrometers. Okay, I understand that from a certain level, but what is our range, right? Talking 1 to 2, 1 to 1.25 micrometers. And my father says, Torrey, we didn't know at the time, but we didn't realize our range is anywhere between a half inch to 3 inches. And I'm like, 3 inches? This much? He says, yeah. So you got this much versus this much. And all of a sudden, Alvin, I started thinking about, I am a wing nut on an airplane wing, 3 inches of variance versus literally 0.125. Which wing nut do I want on the airplane in my wing? I want that wing nut from Japan, or case in point. I bring us back to this. Jannik Sinner's TQC is 0.125, and Carlos's range is 3+. His ability to be loose is there. His ability to be unbelievable at times, and his ability to be kind of just, his range is too broad. And if he's playing great, he beats Jannik every time. But if his range is broad, he has that day in him to not be. And Jannik will rarely be off 0.125. And that's where I wanted to bring, I would entitle my article TQC. And if you're not perfect or darn near, you will lose to TQC on those days when your variance is too broad.
Which is, the range of tolerance, if you
That's right,
is something that we see reflected in a lot of places, especially when we're using comparisons of Japanese-made things versus non-Japanese-made things. You think about, even Mazda. Mazda, the gap between the door and the side panel is like industry leading. Like, it is so thin every time. Every time. They don't know this. Yannick's tennis rackets. Like, most people know that maybe you don't know. Tennis rackets come off of the rack and with variances in their weight.
Yeah.
Right? Plus or minus X amount of grams.
Yep.
Racket says it's supposed to be 310. They have a plus or minus tolerance. Some brands are like 3 grams, which you might buy 2 rackets that are exactly the same. One's 307, one's 313. They're both supposed to be 310. That's a big difference.
Right.
Right? Not Yannick's. Yannick's is like, there's one.
Right.
You 309, 311. Like,
Right.
you probably can't tell the difference.
Right.
So I'll push this back to you then, as we're talking about Jannik Sinner, who now has, what are we at now? 2 Australian Open titles, 1 U.S. Open title, 1 Wimbledon title.
And now Wimby.
So that's 4 Grand Slams. To Carlos is 5.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
What is it about Jannik's tennis that allows him to be so stable?
I think it's his entire approach to the game. I think it's everything about his strokes, everything about his tactics, everything about his footwork. Everything, Alvin, comes back to, is this the highest percentage shot I can play at this time? And let's take that and let's amplify that times 2. Is that the most highest percentage place I can hit it from? And then what's the most or the best and ideal contact point, strike, depth, and ball that I can give you so that I can get the most likely return of that shot? And I will build my patterns from there. If AI were a person, right? If Vision were a tennis player, right? He would be Jannik Sinner. And I think when you look at that from that standpoint, that's what I look at. When I look at using Vision and I look at a Captain America, right? There's some otherworldly things that have to happen for Cap to be as good as Cap is, depending on which episode of Marvel you're watching. Cap was amazing heart, amazing effort, amazing. Is that all you got? Kind of, and then you added some superlatives to it, right? Insane foot speed, insane shot making ability, insane strength, speed, and such, right? But there's still that variability of there's going to be a day that you can't just rely on your superlatives. There's going to be a day where your tolerance is just too broad. And that's what happened today, Alvin. I feel Jannik played a very high percentage match. Let's be real, Alvin. He played a pretty high percentage match in the French. Some superlatives happened to allow Carlos to win. He really should have won the French if we're being real.
Right.
Let's be honest.
It took Carlos being the most Carlos version of Carlos to prevent him from doing so. And I need to be clear here. Like, we talk about what happened with Jannik being a double match point, right? But I think if we're going to talk about ifs, like you brought this up last week when we were chatting, if Carlos doesn't have an issue with the thing in his eye early on, like maybe he's able to take advantage of some of the opportunities he had in the first set, and is able to steal that first set because he was in there from the very beginning.
100%.
So I say it's all valid. Like, it's all valid.
Yep.
It's also valid. But to your point about Jannik and his very, very small margins of variance, in a space like Wimbledon, where everything is happening so fast, so fast, it does not leave a lot of room for error.
Right.
Matches are generally won by high amounts of winners, fewer errors.
Yep.
We're going for it. And you start looking at, I don't have the stats in front of me for the match, but at one point, and we were talking about this during the match, Jannik had no aces and one unforced error, and Carlos had 6 aces at that point and 7
double faults.
Right.
Remember that? That was late to mid, late first, early to mid second. I think was when that stat was taken.
And essentially Carlos had 6 aces, 7 double faults. I think he creeped up to about 9 because just in that particular game he started throwing a few of them. But we were talking about what does that actually reflect, right? And the conversation was centered around, okay, so Sinner's not throwing in a lot of aces, but he's not throwing in a lot of defaults. It just kind of seems like he's not actually going that big risk on the first serve. Whereas Carlos, obviously the double faults are high because he's feeling pressured to go bigger on the second serve. But then the other side of it is he's also got the aces because he has to go bigger.
And he was fortunate enough to convert and to strike the chalk. The flip side of that, Alvin, is as we watched, the aces started to tick up. I think he had no aces in the first and the second, and had 7 in the third. I don't know what the stats were in the fourth, but he clearly had a few and held serve just fine. And I always felt like Carlos was close. At any given time, you felt like he could turn it around. But at the same time, he was just a bit more mortal today. He did not have the ability to turn it around completely. And this is back where TQC comes in. The TQC did not allow him. His level of margin was too broad. Every time he played a good point, he played a bad point. Every time he had an ace, he had a double fault. There was one game, Alvin, where he started the game off with a double fault, got down left 30, ended up having 3 aces to finish the game. You're not going to have 3 aces a game to hold serve every time. You're just not. So at the end of the day, as well as he played to help cover the spread, if you will, of his range, he also had too much, at least today, had too much of the negative, of the excess, right, in the error department to really be competitive in a very competitive match. He was fighting himself and Jannik's day, is what it felt like to me. He just wasn't his normal self. I would like to speak more to that down the road. But suffice it to say that he was not his optimum self. Some of it had to do with Jannik, for sure. The other part had to do with he played pretty well all week, Alvin, the last 2 weeks, and he played some pretty good tennis against several players. Today was not his best match. I think we can all be pretty comfortable saying that.
Like we talked about this during the match, and I think we've mentioned it on this podcast before. I know I have. When these two players get against each other, when you look at all the stats in the matches prior, you almost have to disregard them because what they do against other players is not necessarily reflective of what they can do against each other.
Right.
The opportunities aren't
there as often. Right.
The
option A, option B are countered immediately. So we're now left with option C and D and maybe even E. To your point, Alvin, he was tight on drop shots, Carlos, right? He missed 2 or 3 crucial drop shots in the second that you're like, he makes that ball easily. He made some drop volleys that were a foot and a half from the net a few days ago against Taylor that you were like, wow, that's a pretty delicate, perfectly cooked drop shot right there on a drop volley off of a reflex serving volley second shot move.
Right.
That's pretty good for a guy that's not a serving volleyer who perhaps grew up a little more on clay than on hard court. And today, he was missing routine forehand drop shots. Even when he made a couple, there was a couple of drop shots he had, Alvin, that were probably middle to the back part of the service box. And you're like...
Yeah, Jannik comes up and hits running forehands, like moving forward.
With options.
At the height of the net. Yeah.
Right, with options. Could have gone anywhere. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so at that point, that lets you know that Carlos wasn't truly Carlos, or at least the optimum Carlos that we've seen. That happens. That happens at any level. I don't care if you're playing a level 6, in your hometown, or you're playing a level 1 national clays. What's going on right now? It was simply a matter of it wasn't his best day. It happened to be in the final, unfortunate for him. But again, I go back to TQC. The total quality control of Jannik clearly affected him, because when you're not playing your best and you need that best, you start to force and press.
So that's my question then. Like, if you were, I'm gonna press you on this one.
Sure.
The level that Carlos was able to produce today, do you think that was a Carlos induced issue or a Jannik produced issue? Because
it's a great question. What do you think?
I think it's Jannik. Okay. And the issue, not necessarily the issue, is that Carlos will do this. He came out playing well, right?
Yep.
He got down. He gave up an early break. Like, he was playing well, and then had a sloppy game at two. I guess it was 2-all.
Yep.
Got broken. Okay. Jannik solidifies the break, and then he comes back and he pulls out this Carlos magic, right?
Yep.
Which he does. That can happen against anybody, right? But in the very first game of the second set, what happens? Center breaks him.
Yeah.
Right? He's not
never to relinquish, by the way.
He's not able to get that break back. Someone else is going to slip up.
Right.
Taylor Fritz, or Taylor. Let's say Andre Rublev, right? Is likely not going to serve and win 5 straight service games from that up that break against Carlos.
Right.
Where Jannik Sinner is. You don't
100%. Point well taken.
Yeah, you don't get those opportunities.
Right.
You mess up, he capitalizes, and then we're on to the third set at that point.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened. Let's put it this way: Carlos did that to Taylor. First game of the match. Taylor gets broken. Carlos doesn't get him sniffed the rest of the set. That's it. That was the case. And you messed it up.
Exactly.
And then we get into that third set, and it was about 3-all. We're watching the match, and I said, man, this feels like a really rank and file third set right now.
Yep.
I think whoever wins this set is going to win this match.
I'll win the match. Yep.
And what are the crowd say? What do the rest of you say? I got one person yelling, this is going to go 5. And I said, no. This match is boring right now. We've hit a boring spot in the match.
We hit a low, which means the magic of Carlos was not there.
Right. And also that means If it's boring, that means both players are doing what they're supposed to do. At that point, we'd gone hold at that point 6 or 7 consecutive straight holds,
Yep.
which means the guy who allows more variance is probably going to slip first.
And touche, it happened.
Exactly what happened.
It's TQC all over again. I'm going to go back and answer your question because I think it's a little more, at least from my micro point of view. I know you're always looking a little more macro, which I appreciate that in your perspective. Alvin, let me tell you what I saw. I saw a player that played great tennis 3 matches earlier. And I saw a player that was not on the way down in the sense that he wasn't playing up. He wasn't playing poorly. He just wasn't playing up to his optimum level. There were points in that Rublev match, Alvin, where Carlos looked like he had every answer. There were points in the Taylor Fritz match where he had the answers, and Alvin, it looked like he was beating Taylor with his B game, which was a certain volley and coming forward. I felt like if you were to range your tennis, and I've said this before on this podcast months ago, day 1, awful. Day 7, perfect. We rarely have day 1 and day 7. You're always in between 2 and 6. And your range being 3 to 4, right? This day today looked like day 4. And Alvin, in my opinion, it actually crept further into day 3 the more the match went on. And to my point about total quality control, the micrometers of variance between Jannik and the inches of variance between Carlos were seen today. He was in between 3 and 4, and that meant a missed dropper or a good shot, a big forehand rip, an inside in, or an ace, or a double fault, and a sprayed wide ball out of nowhere. And because that variance was so wide and quite frankly so far in between of each other, Carlos, did not have the ability to rely on his normal magic. He forced droppers. He had to pull out second set holds. He had to go for more on second serves. Jannik went from 0 aces in the first 2 to 7. And so what this, third 7 and third set. And what this now happens now, Alvin, is something very sneaky. You're not able to rely on you, but you're hoping the other guy stays the same. Let me find my footing. Let me get some rhythm. Let me have a good point where I can just be able to find it. If I can construct 3 or 4 good points, I will take a day 3 into day 4. A day 4 can be pretty dangerous if I'm playing well and I can at least hold. And you're not playing much better. But unfortunately, Jannik was playing better and actually got to playing better in the third. And that, to me, is when the wheels fell off.
So
now Carlos starts to press. Now Carlos, there was a few games in the third set, Alvin. If he didn't ace his way out of it, he'd have gotten beaten 6-1 in a few of those games. And that would have completely disemboweled Carlos in the match that he had. He did good to keep it as competitive as it was, considering the day and considering how much that Jannik picked it up a notch in the third and the fourth.
Yeah, so that's a really good point because I felt like as we were watching it, we were talking about like who is winning points in what ranges, right? Your 0 to 4, 5 to 8, 8 plus.
Right.
And earlier in the match, Carlos was winning the longer points. It seems like once they got into the extended baseline rallies, he was able to come up with the goods.
Yep.
But even with that being said, I never really felt like in those rallies was he dictating.
Right.
He was improvising.
Yep.
And coming up with some really interesting shots while on defense and turning defense into neutral and neutral
Right.
offense. But
which he's known to do.
That's like that's almost part of a superpower, right?
100%.
Like his ability to steal from defensive positions is
right.
But then again,
if given the chance,
if given the chance, right? If given the chance, and that's the big one. But I think his preference would be to be the one in the middle of the court dictating to the corners, right? Which outside of his first serve, he wasn't really he wasn't getting a lot of opportunities to do that. So
right.
even when he was winning, he was not necessarily winning with any type of variety of ways to win.
Yes. Which was why I felt like he started to press because what do? You go back to what you're doing well.
Right.
What am I doing well? Well, it's like a pitcher on the mound shaking off the catcher signal. Nope, ain't got that.
Nope.
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 Well, what you're doing well is your first serve. Yeah, first serve. And let me double down on the first serve. And the reality of it was that was really the only thing that was really getting him some free points, or at least giving him the look that he wanted. So, hey, first of all, let me say this. Hats off to Jannik Sinner for playing a very, very solid match, a great tournament, by the way. And I just felt like, let me give you my flip side of that, Alvin. 4 days ago, I lose track of the exact number. We both saw a Grigor Dimitrov who had him dead to rights.
So,
right, and I want to put this in context for the viewers and listeners, and you all may agree or disagree with me. I've been teaching tennis and watching tennis for a long time. I've dealt with this range of a good player's day 1 to day 7 for a long time. And I've watched it for multiple tournaments, from nationals, which are 7, sometimes 8 days long, to Grand Slams, which are 14 days long and such. And there's just this greater likelihood of variance over a week or a 14-day time frame, right? I say that to say most tournaments most of us play are over a 3-day period, right? 2 matches on Saturday, 2 matches on Sunday, a match maybe on Monday, right? That's what it is. You got 6 matches, 5 matches, but you're playing over the course of a couple of days. When you now take that same thing, Alvin, or you stretch over a week, different story. You're not going to play great every day. You stretch that now over 2 weeks. You're not going to play that as well as you might have played. And the flip side of that is now you're probably not going to play that great at all, never to get back to day 7, the rest of the event.
So let's go back to that.
Please, because I think this is important because both players were at day 7s at different times.
Right.
Even if you want to say day 6, go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, so if you break the tournament into 2 different tournaments, right?
Right.
Week 1 versus week 2.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and let's look at Carlos' first day and what he was able to produce against Fognini, right?
Yep.
Less than stellar, right? Worked
Yep.
his way up to decent form against Rublev, right? And so that's the quarterfinals, which was
Yep.
Monday, I believe, or Sunday. It's last week Sunday. It's last
Yep.
week Sunday. Okay. In the same round, Grigor. So we agree. We watched from Carlos against Andre was top to steal one of Andy Roddick's terms. Top play, Carlos, right?
100%.
That was the best of the hits right there.
100%.
Best up.
Best
In the
up, for
exact
sure.
same round, sorry, that was the round of
16.
Round of 16.
Yeah, yep.
In the exact same round, Sinner was down 2-0 against Grigor. So
Down and out, down for the count.
So let's
2 sets to none straight. Wasn't even close.
Yeah. So let's say this is first round of a 16-man tournament, right? Okay. One of our players skirts out. Okay. One player plays the match of his life. Exactly. And now we're Sinner dials in against Finn.
Yep.
Sinner against probably the best sharpening test against Novak, and then shows up ready to roll. Now, Carlos goes from playing against Rublev, brings that same magic against Norrie, but the thing against Norrie is that Norrie had nothing to hurt him.
Right.
So Carlos
right.
is that they're more or less playing an exhibition match.
Yep.
Right? And then it goes to playing against Taylor Fritz, which is just a different style of match.
Yep.
It is not the same style of match that
Right.
he looks so good when he played against Rublev, which Rublev is maybe in this instance the poor man's version of Sinner.
Yep.
Right? Or the poor man's version of Djokovic. They are all court baseline driven players who are
baseline driven, and in Taylor's case had a phenomenal serve. It was really, if you look at it, in some ways, Alvin, very similar to Fognini, in the sense that there's the slapper effect.
Yep.
And he's going to hit his shots. You don't ever feel threatened per se. And to me, that's where day 4, 5, 6, 6.5, back to 6, back to 5, back to 4. We're back to that level, maybe at best day 5 against Taylor Fritz. And mind you, Taylor Fritz had 25 aces, if I'm not mistaken, in that match, Alvin. So you're looking at Taylor couldn't have played better. But even though it went, was it 4 sets?
4 sets.
Even though it went 4, it wasn't like it was a very contested 4. It was just you knew Taylor was going to hold 90% of the time. But Taylor didn't ever threaten a lot from what I saw. To my point, there goes your sine and cosine wave.
Yeah.
And now he comes in here back. He wasn't playing poorly, Certainly nothing against Jannik, but he wasn't playing, as you say, top flight Carlos. And you look at the other, right? You now look at tangent, cotangent of my main man, Jannik, and Jannik went from playing pretty good, pretty solid, had a dip, and by the time he got past Grigor, his level went very, very solid. And Alvin, you heard it right here. He beat the brakes off of Novak. I mean, he absolutely played pretty flawless tennis against Novak going away, and then didn't look like he gave up much in the match today. So that's where I say, and I know it's hard for sometimes for the viewers to understand. Most viewers would like to think that every player plays a certain way all the time, which is just simply not true. Everybody has some variance. Unfortunately, Jannik Sinner's variance is pretty tight, and he played poorly 3 days, 4 matches, 4 or 5 days ago, which I think allowed him to kind of rebound from that. You won't play poorly after you play poorly. You'll only play better. Flip side is also true. You won't play great after you play great.
Right.
You will start to come down. And that's the thing I want a lot. And a lot of our listeners, if you're good, solid tennis players, you know this to be true. There's just matches you play very well in. You just play great. You don't have much control over it. It's just how you played. The flip side of that is, and you're not going to play much better. Really dial in that next match because you're not going to play much better. You won't. You can be sharp, you can win, but you're not going to play sharp. And the flip side, you get through that bad match, you're only going to play better. You won't play that bad again the next 3 or 4 days. So that's something I think that the average watcher may not always understand. And for those of us that know competition, that know play, we know how good we play one day to the next, start to kind of track how well you're playing and then gauge your chances, your competition, even your game style that day based on the fact of how well did I play before. And take a lot of stock if you're able to grind through a bad match, because you'll play great the rest of the tournament. And if you play pretty well, nothing to be mad at or be upset at, but you probably won't play as good. And so you're going to have to kind of grind a little bit because that shot won't be there. That step up winner down the line, that drop shot for Carlos, it won't be there as automatic as you'd like for it to be, and it may have been the day before.
So let's go, as I like to do. Let's go macro, right? Let's pull
macro
here, right? So we're now effectively 3/4 of the way through the season, right? Carlos has won 1 Grand Slam, final the other. Sinner has won 2 Grand Slams.
Sure, Aussie and today.
Yep. And is obviously post suspension, yada yada yada. So we're on the hard court here for the rest of the season, right?
Right.
A little mostly indoor mostly outdoor the rest of the summer.
Yep.
And then following that we'll go indoor in Asia and then we'll shut it down. How should we look at this matchup from a macro point? Like under what circumstances? Because if you up double match point in the 4th set.
And the French.
Right?
Yep.
Let's assume, let's live in a world in which Jannik did win that match.
Right.
Right? 3 sets.
For all intents and purposes, he should have, could have.
Yeah. And
things being different, would have.
And then very similar scoreline 3-1 here in this match.
Right.
Now, obviously, he did not win that first match, so that's the truth.
The reality of it.
To explain anything, right?
Yep.
That happened, and
it speaks for itself.
We were all better off for it. What does the Carlos Alcaraz camp say or start to do as we transition to hard court, thinking about those 2 things? Like, yes, he won that French Open match, but I'm sure Juan Carlos Ferrer would be the first to would look at it from the same point of like, but he almost didn't. And so if they finish that match in 4, they'd have a 4 sets of tennis to look at and work with to make adjustments off of.
Yep.
So in the world of Sinner versus Alcaraz, right? Very similar to in the world of Federer versus Nadal, when we got to that point of once Nadal directly just took forehands to backhands religiously, right?
100% of serve to return in one match.
Dominated that matchup for a while until later on Federer decided to step in and hit that backhand, take it up the line occasionally.
100%.
Did that thing start to turn a little bit?
Yep.
What is it that Jannik is doing to Carlos that Carlos needs to now
adjust to
Yeah.
and
It's
what.
hard to say that
Sure.
because Carlos has won 5 of the last 6 matches they played against each other, right?
100%.
But
100%.
always tight,
Yep.
always tight.
Right. Is it now 8-5 now, if I'm not mistaken, in the rivalry head to head?
It's close, yeah, something like
I
that.
think it was 8-4 before and 8-5 today. Here's let me say this, and I love your term level set. Let's level set first before you make that, and let's draw this up to a couple of things. Number one, this is early phases of their careers. This is the Fed Nadal late 2000s ish. Not quite 2007, 8, 9, where Nadal's starting to get his true foothold in the rivalry itself.
It was still surface based at that point.
100%. And to his credit, Sir Fed had the game on lockdown. I want to say in those 3 years was 9 for 12 of the slams. The level set here is Carlos has been playing at such a high level that he has made everyone else catch up to him, like Fed was in the early 2000s. I feel like Carlos has now been caught. We now have a rivalry. And I feel like at this point, not that we didn't have before, but we now have a true rivalry in the sense that now Carlos is now forced to adjust. If I am Juan Carlos and Camp, I am now thinking, okay, Carlos, we can't just improvise in the moment as much anymore. We can't just wheel and deal and just feel it and go off certain patterns, tactics, and trust your dropper. As much as all those are good plays from a given time, we now have to get a little more methodical in our pursuit of point construction and point and game management. We have to now make sure we have a couple of better first serve, first strike. We have to hit better targets on the serve. We have to really make sure that some of our shots are not just the shots we want, but they're the shots the other player doesn't want. And this is going to be a big learning curve for Carlos.
Let me ask you there. I'm going to put this question to you right here. What shot is that for Sinner? What shot does Sinner not want? Like, what is something that Carlos can expose then?
He did it several times today, Alvin. Just didn't do it enough to really hurt him. The hard rip at body was a tough shot for Sinner. The ball that goes back behind Sinner on the forehand. You take Sinner wide, hard cross court of the deuce, and you take that next ball, especially if Sinner's trying to change direction, you go back behind him. Ironically, not a good shot for most of us righties. It's that ball back hard. We don't think anybody will do it. We hit our best ball. You're going to go to our weakness, right? You're supposed to. But newsflash, not everybody does that. And I felt like that's a play that when you go back behind someone to their best shot, they're just not expecting it because why would you do that? It's my best shot. But that's also because it makes it a weakness. Marty Fish did it for years. He went back behind you backhand all day long. Like, why wouldn't I? And that's the one shot you're not expecting. So I say it to say that's a play that I think Carlos is going to have to get better at. I think Carlos is going to have to set up the dropper a bit more, not be so quick to go to it and rely on it. The dropper should be more of a throw you off play, the variable, not the play itself. And I feel like he's going to have to get a lot better with the serve and volley and get that first volley because, as you saw in some of his first points, he's not a great passer per se if the ball is going away from him as well as he moves. He's not a great passer because he hugs the baseline so much, the volley goes past him a bit. So those are two plays right there that he's going to have to get better at, Jannik, to cover. And Carlos has to get better at executing.
That's
the third part is Carlos will have to get a better first serve percentage on his off days. He simply has to know when he's not serving great. The slice body worked well from today. The flat body worked well from today. Unfortunately, worked well for Jannik too. But Carlos has to get better non-risky first serves. He did not kick out wide enough to me today, Alvin, on the ad. His slice out wide was pretty good most times he hit it. When he caught it, it was an ace or a service winner. But it seemed like to me he kept going for the flat out wide way too often. Missed about 60% of them, only made 40%.
Right.
And if he makes it, it's still going to Jannik's backhand. The kick out wide, especially the really sharp kick, really wide, would have pulled him out wide enough to really make a difference. I don't think he has that serve just yet, and I don't think he really hit it as well as he could have to really pull Jannik off the court, and Jannik made him pay for it.
I'll push on that one a little bit because I think it's more of a reflection of the execution point that you made earlier. I noticed, and this is I hate to be too prescriptive around we just saw because this is a flash in time, right? This
100%. Snapshot in time.
one match. It is
100%.
one match, right? But I think the one thing that you can probably take from it is the drop shots that we saw as plays seem to be a reflection of pressing a bit. Not,
100%.
which also comes back to your point about constructing points off of first serves made. It
Yes.
didn't seem like Carlos really felt comfortable with hit first serve in, ball comes back, ball one goes here.
Yep.
Because a lot of players, if he's making that first serve,
Right.
the return quality is not as good.
Right.
It's Jannik's return quality off of the first serve, and this is something that Taylor mentioned as well in his post match against Carlos, is that he needed to go bigger off of the first serve return,
Right.
trying to put Carlos in a more compromised position on ball one.
Right.
Taylor was trying to bunt too much, trying to get back to neutral, and Carlos
Right.
was throwing early.
Buying time with the bump,
Right.
bump deep, and only realizing while it's buying him time, it's also buying Carlos
Yeah,
more time
or
to
Carlos
set
coming
up
flying
set
in
shot.
as well. Like, and now you're
100%.
drop volley first. Now that's a different story, right? So, but now you go against Sinner, whose first serve return quality is he has usurped Novak as the best returner in the game right now, and that is something. I think that's where Carlos starts to feel like he's under pressure a lot.
Right.
Pressure to
Right.
your point, execute.
Execute.
Where that is not his.
Not his forte.
His
Let's be
forte
honest.
is dazzling, not
Right.
boring ass execution.
Right. And just old standard serve plus one.
Serve plus one.
And I feel like Alvin, as I say, and if you combine the 2 points, not his best day, and TQC on Jannik's side, both ramping up, and you got a day 4 versus a day 6 on the other side of the net, and you have a TQC of 0.125 and a TQC of +3, right? You just started to see the difference in the two. Make no mistake, if Carlos is having a day 6 and Jannik's having a day 6, you get French Open final. You get unreal tennis, and Carlos may just edge that match out. If you get anything less than day 6 and the other guy's at day 6, well, that's going to favor TQC. So I just wanted to make sure, making the point that I don't think Carlos forced or pressed because he wanted to. Carlos pressed and forced because he felt he had to be relevant. And I just want to make sure, and to your point, 50%, maybe 55 was Jannik induced, and the other 45 to 50% was induced because he wasn't hitting the ball. There were some droppers out that he missed. If he hit it, that would have been a clean-cut winner. But he missed them in the net. Carlos almost never misses drop shots. That's how it first clued into me, like, he's off today. He hit some droppers that were well set up, well disguised. He missed, I think, a couple in one game. He missed 2 within the span of about a game and a half. And I'm like, wow. And I remember one play, we talked about it. He should have got in on the stick volley.
Yeah.
And he waited to try to set up his drop volley. He played a drop volley, but he gave it away in the process. And I remember thinking to myself, he is so rattled right now that he can't make his drop volley, that he's spending points to get it back online. About a game later, he nailed a perfect drop shot.
Right.
But unfortunately, it just showed me that's a true play in his arsenal. That's not an extra, an alternative. That's a play.
Right.
And when that play wasn't working, he was going to force to make that play. No different than he does an inside-in forehand. No different than it is a step-up ball down the line. That's one of his go-to plays. And when he felt like he didn't have that, he felt like he didn't have a sword. You know what I mean? To me, is what I saw.
But even going back to your point about the day 3 to day 6, fluctuation.
Right, fluctuation, great word.
It also happens within a match.
Oh,
and
for sure.
And it
happens the most in a match.
Yeah, it happens.
Especially 3 out of 5.
Yeah, and it, again, back to the point about variance there, though, it doesn't seem to happen very much to Jannik within matches. His level is kind of the level. Whereas, against Dimitrov, he never really got past day 3 level, right? But against Carlos, he was kind of floating between day 5 and day 6 pretty much the entire match.
100%.
I will say, between game that once down 2-4 in the first set, all the way to the end of that set, Carlos hit day 6, day 7 tennis for a minute there. And then maybe down to day 4. but then Jannik never really wavered.
I would tell you he capitalized on some bigger serves. I would say he sniffed at the high end of day 4. The only reason I can't give him day 5, day 6 status, Alvin, is he had so many double faults. He had so many missed returns. He had so many backward plays after a forward play.
But not in that period, though. In those 6 games, he was amazing. He was
I would say he played more Carlos-esque for sure, but you take the game, in my opinion, you take the game at its totality, and there was just a lot of mistakes. And I felt those mistakes evened out. That's what I saw. I get your point. I know what you mean for that span. But you take it in the totality of it, in my opinion, they were makeups for the earlier misses, is what I saw.
Yeah, and he's a to use
very streaky player at times.
The kids say vibe player. He's a vibe player. Like
100%.
He definitely rolls off of rhythm.
Yep.
And there was a time in the match where there was like it was very rhythmless.
Yeah.
The crowd not really less than engaged, but the match got standard. Rallies got shorter.
Right.
Does not
more routine.
Yes.
Which favors TQC.
Right. Exactly.
You know.
And then it was at about, I think in the 4th set, Jannik was serving 4-3. Finally got that break, and Carlos was up double break point.
Yeah.
And you could see it on his face. It's like, wait a minute, we got a chance here.
Yep.
We got a chance here. And I was like, I don't think so, but that's the kind of. Because exactly where we were when he left the door in the French Open, right? And but it did not happen today. He was able to calm his nerves, fight off those break points.
Jannik said, "You're gonna learn today."
Yeah.
You know, and that's what happened. And again, Alvin, I cannot. You know, I know we want to maybe segue over to the women at some point, which are certainly worth giving their due with Iga. I cannot say enough about Jannik's just impervious way of attacking the game and attacking opponents where that we're gonna hashtag TQC on for my purposes today, but that's how he trains, Alvin. That's how he practices. He's going for the micrometers of execution. He's not going for the razzle dazzle. He's not going for the flashy. He's going for the standard. He's going for the repeatable. He's going for the most likely. And how can I make the most likely happen the most often? And there's a certain amount of precision, a surgical amount of precision that he brings to the game that you who play him, and I think Novak saw this the other day, you just have to be ready for a person who's playing that level of precision. Most people don't necessarily plan on playing, for that length of time, nor are they capable of playing for that much time. You almost always expect for a loose game. I used to always tell my juniors, there'll be a loose game in there. He's a big server, but there'll be a loose game in there. He'll have one game, he'll only make 2 or 3 first serves. That's the game you want to lean on him. Make all returns. Get in that game. Could happen early, could happen late. You don't know. Play for that loose game. Get the break, hold serve, you're good to go. He's not a great returner, right? I can almost hear myself coaching players through this situation. He doesn't take returns off, and he doesn't take serves off. So where's your loose game coming from? He may have a loose point. You may have a great point, but you're not out of the woods. There's no loose game. There's few loose points. So at the end of the day, what you're really looking at is a player that has, in a sense, found the way to have a force field, in a sense, around his vulnerabilities. He didn't have a bad back. He has a great forehand. He has a good backhand. Everything is 8.59. There's no 10 plus, but there's no sub 8s. Everything is pretty good. Just saying.
Did Carlos break him in sets 2 through 4?
I don't think Carlos. There was a stat at one point where Jannik had lost one point in the last 4 or 5 service games. Not only do I think he didn't break him, he did not do any damage in those service games.
Probably not until that 3-4 game in the 4th set.
Where was that 15-40?
Yeah.
Which he lost, by the way.
Huh?
Which he lost, that 15-40 game, I might add.
Carlos did, yeah.
Carlos did, to my point. Even when he was up, double break.
Yeah, he still didn't get it. I'm very impressed with, obviously, with Jannik.
Can't help but be.
Like the way he's been able to adapt what he does well to the grass, against Carlos to really put him in
Yeah.
precarious situations.
Right.
It's my gut is like, okay, you get to hard court, you have a little more time, and Carlos, gets a little more space to do more Carlos things, but
Right.
also, I mean, Jannik's won the last three hard court Grand Slams, so like, who am I to say that match is even going to happen?
Right.
Carlos hasn't made the semifinal of a hard court Grand Slam since he won the U.S. Open, like years ago.
Sure.
Someone stat check me on that one because that might not be right, but I think it's right.
Pretty
I
accurate.
think it's right. Off the top of my head. So, but I don't feel necessarily much different about either player.
No.
I think
No.
obviously everyone knows that Carlos serve is a place to improve.
Improve for
And that
sure.
is the next, like, I mean, he starts dropping 20 aces per match in Wimbledon here. That shows you obvious improvement. He served fantastic.
Huge improvement.
Season.
Huge improvement. And he was in yet another final. If this was his bad day, Alvin, if I'm his team, when I step back from it, I'm feeling pretty good about what we've done developmentally.
Sure.
If this was his bad match and we just have to work on him peaking a little later in Grand Slams, so be it. He did play a long clay season. He did play a long French, right? And we got to keep in mind, he's played probably 30%, give or take, more matches than Jannik did through that 90-day period, right? So there's a lot of still a little bit of wear and tear. But again, we're back in the final, so this is a rivalry, Alvin. This to me supersedes what we see on X's and O's and ones and twos and the whatever stats AI can give us. This is a rivalry, and both players, I think, if anybody, Mr. Intrinsic himself, Mr. Innate, saw this when he mentioned it in the post game of the French. I'm not just going to keep beating him. He's going to beat me one day.
He did say that. Carlos did say that.
And I think that's his own understanding of how tactically solid and how TQC that Jannik is. I'm not going to be able to pull off the impossible every time. And I think that's what we saw today. I would even dare say that what he said to himself, he was listening to himself during said match because it felt like he kind of sensed that. Having said that part, though, don't think for a second that Carlos isn't pissed that he lost that one today, that he won't come back and be more fired up because on his best day, Carlos is a bit better. Now let's see if he can do what it takes to now improve the rivalry. Alvin, I want to go back just briefly and go macro. I'll steal one of your lines. Macro, do you remember the years in the early, you may not, I'm a little older than you, 70s, 80s when Chris and Martina were going back and forth?
I absolutely do not. I was born in 80.
There was some levels there, and I'll help you out for history purposes. Martina had come back Martina always had good hands, and of course being lefty, she had the slice, she had the roll, she had some change-ups, and Chris just had better ground strokes. She was just better. Martina came out early 80s, fit as a fiddle, most fit player in the women's tour, started serving volleying, started bringing the game, an all-court game coming forward, and Chris couldn't handle it. You know what happened in the mid-late 80s? Guess who started serving volleying? Guess who started coming forward more? Chris, out of missed ground strokes herself, starts coming forward. And you were always like, I didn't know she could even volley. She had great volleys. And guess who started standing back more and playing more solid, playing longer points? Martina. The two players became so good, they started, in a sense, mirroring each other's best tactics. I fast forward to Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi, who had played some classic matches in the 90s and early 2000s, right? You saw the same thing. Pete went from coming in all the time to stand back, hit that running forehand. Agassi started coming forward more and hitting the swing and volley. And in some matches, he'd play the punisher role and would keep you back. But in other matches, he would come forward and bring it to you a little bit more. You knew both players had, in a sense, like avatars, had matched the other players, a gift, right? Well, now we're in that same level. We, of course, can't leave out the great Roger Federer and Nadal, who both helped each other, ramp up that level. And you mentioned that fateful match when Fed finally came over the top of the backhand. He even got a coach to help him come over the backhand more with Ivan Lubicic.
You can't leave out Novak either because Novak, in your own experience, right, could not first serve, nothing to speak of.
First serve and forehand.
And could not volley. Right?
Oh my God! And now he might be one of the most accomplished volleyers on the men's tour. I say it to say, overall, things start making you change and start making you get the other side of what you didn't have. And that's what rivalries do. They make you dig deeper. You're not playing for everybody else. You're playing to beat that player who you know you will end up playing.
Right.
This is NBA, this is NHL, this is MLB, this is tennis, right? Remember those years when Lakers and Celtics were going back and forth, and then Detroit had to find a way to beat. They had to beat Chicago, and then you had those years where the Spurs they were putting players together, even in free agency, to beat them in the playoffs. They weren't worried about the regular season. They're worried about that matchup. And they had players they knew who matched up against that player very well. That's what we're getting into now with tennis, which is, in my opinion, the ultimate game, because now that player has to match the tactics, not another player being added to that situation. So I really feel good about this rivalry. It's healthy. Had Carlos ran away with it a little bit, I felt like it may have even made it, I'm not going to say boring, it would have made it a little bit easier. He may have rested a little bit. Jannik has forced Carlos to have his full attention now on what I need to do to get better.
Right.
I'm looking forward to the hardcourt season, looking forward to it, because now Carlos comes in saying, okay, I knew you beat me one day. It has now happened. Guess what? I'm going to attack this even more because I enjoy winning too much. I enjoy being successful when I do too much. And we're about to be blessed with a magical run, I think, in the next several slams. My only concern, Alvin, the rest of the tour may not be ready. The rest of the tour may not be ready for the boosters. These guys are about to put on tennis.
Yeah, I want to go back to your point about the players pulling the best out of each other and forcing evolution. I think we need to look at it from a standpoint of how long these guys have been playing tennis. They're not that old. They're 22, 23, right?
Right.
When you start thinking about players, junior players, even at the highest level, it's very oftentimes players are good in the 12s.
Yep.
They're good in the 14s.
And they start to fade.
Puberty hits. You start to see some shifting in the 16s and the 18s.
Sure.
We're only talking about 6 years. That's a 6-year space, right?
Sure.
You look at 18 to 22, 23 as another space.
Very pivotal 5-6 years.
People start to get used to their athletic abilities, right?
Sure.
And then now you start to, but we're still far away from remember,
peak.
26 to 28 is the peak.
Right.
So we have a lot left to see from
100%.
Does Jannik need to get better coming forward and finishing points off the net?
Right.
Absolutely. Does Carlos need to get a little sharper, a little more, lower his variance? That's probably where against Jannik.
Right.
Put it that way. A little bit sharper on the return. On the first serve return, right? He didn't really put a lot of pressure on Sinner on his service games for the better part of that match. So there's room for improvement, but there's always been room for improvement for every superstar, for every
100%. But now on the losing end, you see it more. It's come home, right? And now you are left to deal with it. And I like that Carlos, I think if anybody's more innate with that understanding, it's him. He sees it. He knew it then. He now got burned by it, and now he's like, okay, now I gotta address it. And we're only gonna see him continue to improve. I was actually very impressed on the flip side of that with Jannik being able to match and adjust. He served as well as he's ever served, Alvin. He served as well as he's ever served in a match to this level. He didn't serve great against Novak. Served okay. Held serve well. But he served bigger today at times than he's ever served. And for that matter, I felt like really, when's the last time you've seen Jannik hold serve 3-4 sets in a row? With very few double faults, I might add. You know what I mean? And so that to me told me that he was locked in on what he was trying to accomplish today. So again, the rivalry is very healthy. It's going to be a good one. I still say my only concern is the rest of the tour, because we've already talked about this offline. 3, 4, and 5 may or may not be ready. I'm just going to say may not be ready. And 8 through 16 ain't ready, to handle what they got to do. It's not to say these guys can't lose on a given day. If I'm Carlos and I'm playing at let's just say a 17 UTR level, my bad day, my 2 day can still get beat by anybody, right? That's top 10 in the world. But the chance of me having a 2 day, pretty rare. And the chance you have a 6 day when I have my 2 day is even more rare. And that's the key. And that's what we're looking at. They're only going to keep taking this thing up a notch. And as each of them plays their way into these tournaments and kind of really realizes it's going to only be some better tennis. And we were just blessed enough in the early 2000s through 20 teens with Roger, Rafa, and of course Novak. And now we're seeing it again. You're rarely blessed with this much greatness this close together. And I feel like that's what I want to see. And I really hope people don't start saying, oh, I'm kind of tired of seeing Carlos and Jannik in the final. Buddy, you're witnessing history. You're witnessing the best. It's like saying, I'm tired of seeing that Lambo and that Ferrari. Buddy, that's two of the best. You gotta appreciate what you see. You're in the presence of excellence right here.
I was
You know what I mean?
I was texting with a buddy this morning before the final, and he's like, and he was a former roommate of mine. We watched a lot of tennis matches together, especially in the Federer and Nadal days. And I was a Federer fan where matches against Nadal like really put me through the ringer, right? Like really
Oh,
put
for
me through the
sure.
ringer. And I was
Yeah.
watching semifinals and other matches through the lens of can other people keep Nadal away from
Right.
getting to Federer or
Right.
breaking Federer's
Almost
record, right?
rooting for the opponent so they can
Exactly.
help
It
fans
was
pass.
that in those days. And
Right.
I think, fast forward many years forward now, I view this rivalry. One, I'm unapologetic. You had to pick one versus the other, I would say I'm a Carlos Alcaraz fan.
For sure.
His game is something that speaks to me in a way that very similar way that Federer's game spoke to me, but I also
Right.
appreciate how Novak broke tennis, like plays perfect
Right.
tennis, right?
Right. Right.
Jannik Sinner down here plays perfect
He
tennis.
he was pre-vision. He was Jarvis.
Right. So, but in situations like this, where we are now in life, I find myself just rooting for this to happen. I
Right.
told my buddy this morning, I was like, I honestly don't care who wins this match. I'm just so glad that it's happening. Because
Right.
anything besides this match, short of maybe Novak versus Carlos, would be just a disappointment.
Right.
It would be almost a waste of a Grand Slam final. I don't
Right.
want to see any of these other
Right.
contestants.
Right.
Um,
Tennis. There's the players you root for. There's the players that are the top, and then there's tennis at its highest level. We are blessed at this point right here to have all three be two players at the highest level who are at the pushing the boundary of what the game can be, and they are now in iteration. Well, will be number 8, I guess, of their Grand Slam, what could be their Grand Slam, reunion here coming up with the U.S. Open. And it's not to push everybody else aside. That's not the point. It's to see what other chinks in the armor can the other players expose that the top player can take a note of and expose all the way. What else? How closely can the rest of 3 through 8 and 9 through 16 track to keep it competitive? So when they do, ultimately, and as you know, Alvin, find a way, right? A champion's can always find a way, whoever that new champion is. What can they do to overtake? What can they do in the window they have to find a way? Those players they're not working on the game. They're not practicing. They're not improving. So the other guys have that much more to improve on. And how can they continue to stay relevant, stay close, and just hope to stay in the pack, so to speak, and be a stone's throw away from that match that's inevitable now at this point, that you're going to run into one or two, right, along the way. And that, to me, is what I'm looking forward to in the U.S. Open, this whole hardcourt series coming up. But also, when they do face each other, and it's likely they'll face each other again, what will they do? What will they do and treat us to next time in the next, as I say, iteration, the next episode, Dr. Dre style, to show us what tennis, what is still left to expose, exploit, execute, right?
Yeah.
In that next level of that next experience. That's what I'm looking
To
forward
that
to.
point, I'm almost thinking I can put this particular matchup, in a under some glass and put it to the side. Like I know it's been watered. The seeds have been planted. It's been watered. It's been fertilized. It just needs to grow. It's going
100%.
to keep growing, and we'll check in
100%.
on it whenever we need to check in on it. You say they're going to play again. We hope. You never know.
We never know.
But
We
so
never know.
I like to,
But it's fairly
yeah, I like to
likely
not take
given
any.
the
I
situation.
just live in a don't take any of this for granted kind of
I hear
space,
you.
right?
And
So
that's fair.
let that grow. But
Yep.
we'll take a break here in a second, and then we'll talk about the women's final. And similar to how Anisimova and Swiatek first time playing on pro tour, which is they're the same age, 25, 26 years old, whatever it is.
Right.
That all doesn't matter. There are other players when we talk about who's coming up to challenge these guys. Like we're
Right.
not quite sure that anyone can really consistently challenge them right now.
Right.
Talked about it before. With there are players that neither Yannick nor Carlos have played before,
Right.
like your Fonsecas and your Mensiks, right?
Yep.
Feast has been able to, he is still on the upward trajectory and has
Yep.
recently been able to give Carlos some resistance.
Yep.
Musetti, I know you're not. Oh God, it's cool to see your eye roll like in person when I say his name. Um, that's great. But has
As often as you want to see it, Alvin.
yeah, well, he's young enough and
He
capable
is.
enough to pose some problems.
I will err on the. I will agree with you on young enough.
Okay.
I will.
Okay. Okay. But then someone like yeah, I mean, there are players that are young enough who still have some room without the scar tissue
Yep.
to say I can improve. I can
Yeah.
see what the upper echelon of improvement is, and I
Yeah.
will have time to get there.
Yeah.
My growth plates have not fused quite yet.
Right. Right. Good.
So
Good point.
that gives me some excitement because the rest of them that are ages 25 to 28, yeah, I don't, I'm
Put him out to pasture, Alvin.
yeah, I did give my props to Taylor Fritz in our last episode. I do think
Yep.
on this surface,
Oh,
he can, that's his, he
you
is,
you said it best. Best top 4 grass court player in our era right now.
yes,
100%.
yes.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt.
I'll give him a chance here.
Yep.
Any given, over the next 3 years, he has a chance here.
100%.
He does. Okay. Do we feel good?
Everyone else distant fifth and out. And in my opinion, and unfortunately, I wish there was a better clay courter. Shout out to Casper Ruud, who's obviously very, very accomplished in the clay. Who unfortunately lost first, second round of the French and so on. There's others that contest on each surface, but I feel like as a body, I feel like many of them in the entire year, that player isn't the same at spot number 5 or spot number 6 or 7 that can contest or push or defeat on a given time. And that's what made the Grigor match so interesting, was that you saw Grigor not just be ahead, but he was dominating for a certain point and showed some different things. If you go back and look at the tape, if I'm team Alcaraz, I'm going to go back to that tape and see, how was he getting Jannik in such bad spots? The slice was a big deal. Serving the certain spots was a big deal, and start to really see how was he making him uncomfortable. And there's a player won't just match that, solve that riddle tomorrow. But I'll also say the same thing when you look at, some of the things that Taylor was able to do to Carlos. Where was he serving him? Where was he making him uncomfortable? What was he able to do to hold serve so often? Besides the 25 aces, what was he doing? And that's what other people in the camp are going to start looking at and watching in this age of AI and technology and data. You got to think they're going to do more of that going forward. So bottom line, Alvin, I like where this is. I like where the whole world is now in tennis. We're pushing the upper echelon. And I really am looking forward to 5 through 8 contesting as best they can. And I'm looking for the new guys, to your point, coming up, Fonseca's and Mensiks and such. Feast, of course, coming up through the ranks to kind of test these guys, because that will only make tennis better.
Right. So I think we've squeezed this orange. I feel good about.
Yeah.
I don't think we left anything on the table here. So let's take a break.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back and we will discuss the women's final, which happened yesterday.
Yep.
Cool.